Bienvenidos a todos una vez más al canal de Joan de Luga, esta sección de entrevistas de Italian Job. Como podéis ver, hoy tenemos el enorme placer de tener otra vez al profesor Walter Block, profesor de economía en la Universidad de New Orleans y escritor de muchísimos libros. Y si hay alguien que tiene que llamarse Mr. Libertarian hoy en día, seguramente es él, un título que heredó de Rothbard. Y hoy vamos a hablar pues, de varias cosas, sobre todo centrándonos en los problemas de Rothbard y sobre varios temas. Thank you very much, Professor Block, for being with us.
My pleasure.
So I have some different themes I would like to cover. I know, as I said beforehand in Spanish, I said that if there's somebody who has inherited, let's say, the Mr. Libertarian title, right, from Rothbard, it is you. Yet there are distinct areas where there's actually an interesting, maybe a 1% in the overall, but interesting areas of disagreements. Shall I go? I think to start with, you can go obviously expand on these things because I'm not sure I've covered all of these, but there's a few issues. For example, voluntary slavery. In the Ethics of Liberty, Rothbard is quite clear on the fact that the only contracts that are actually legitimate are contracts regarding alienable property, so to speak. And he regards slave contracts as illegitimate to the extent that one's will or one's control over one's will and one's body is inalienable. And therefore, it is illegitimate, so to speak, for Smith, he gives example Smith, to sell himself to slavery to the Jones Corporation or to whomever. Why is he wrong on this? And could you expand on this?
Well, I'm a professor, so I'm never allowed to answer any question directly. So before I answer this question, I have to make two comments. First of all, you didn't translate your introduction, but I noticed that you mentioned Murray Rothbard in your introduction to me. And anytime anyone includes me and Murray in the same paragraph, I'm delighted because I regard him as my mentor, my guru, my friend, my advisor. He's the person who I look upon as the leader of the libertarian movement. And the idea that you would think that I'm his successor, if that's what you said, I think that's roughly what you said, I'm delighted. The second point I want to make is I have to tell you my Spanish joke. So what's my Spanish joke? When I tell my students I'm going to tell a Spanish joke, they think it's at the expense of Hispanic people. Not so. So anyway, I got a PhD at Columbia. In order to get a PhD at Columbia when I was there, you had to have 2 foreign languages. And I'm horrible at languages. I'm very, very bad at languages. But you allowed to substitute math for one language. So I just needed one more language to get my PhD. And I took 4 years of Spanish in high school and 3 years of Spanish in college, and I knew nothing. I'm just horrible at Spanish. The only thing I got from your introduction was you mentioned Rothbard. In any case, I took the exam, and they allowed you to have a Spanish-English dictionary all the time you wanted, and you translated from Spanish to English, and I passed, even though I know nothing. I took the exam with 2 guys from Mexico, both of whom failed the Spanish exam, and I used to tease them about how much better my Spanish was than their Spanish because I passed and they failed. The reason I passed and they failed is they couldn't make a good English sentence to save themselves, whereas I could, once I got the idea with the dictionary and all the time I wanted, I could figure, I could write a good English sentence. So that's my Spanish joke, hardly at the expense of Hispanic people. Okay, now that I've got that out of the way, let me talk about voluntary slave contracts and why I disagree with Murray. But again, before I answer that, I've got something else I want to say. We are not an Ayn Rand cult. In the Ayn Rand cult, if you disagree with Ayn Rand, they kick you out of the movement. I've disagreed with Murray on 4 or 5 things, and I think you've got a list, and after we do the voluntary slavery, you'll do another 1 or 2 or 3. And I never got kicked out of the Rothbard cult because there's no such thing as a Rothbard cult. Murray and I disagree. Hans Hoppe and I disagree. Joe Salerno and I disagree. They disagree with each other. Murray disagreed with his mentor, Mises. Everyone was on good terms, totally. One of your teachers is Philip Bagus, and he and I are buddies, but we disagree on something in monetary theory, but we're still friends. So I think the difference between a cult and a non-cult is people can disagree amiably and, just give their reasons and don't say the other guy is a son of a bitch or anything like that. But certainly I would never say that about Murray. Okay, with this introduction, I now want to talk finally about answering your question, voluntary slavery. So here's the situation. My son, God forbid, has a horrible disease, and it'll cost $20 million to cure him. You're a very rich man, and you've long wanted me to be your slave, and I come to your plantation, I'll pick cotton, and I'll give you economics lessons, and if you don't like what I do, you can whip me or even kill me. So we make a deal. You give me the 20 million and I give it to my son's doctors and I save his life. And as in the case that Austrian economists know that in every voluntary exchange, without exception, there's mutual gain, at least in the ex ante sense, if not in the ex post sense. So I gain because I value his life more than my freedom. You gain because you value my servitude more than the 20 million. You're very rich. You're as rich as Bill Gates. So we mutually gain. And I think this is a valid contract. Now, Murray says it's not really valid because you can't change your will. Now, you're whipping me or something, and I hate you, and, I don't like being whipped. I'm not a masochist. And to me, the issue is not the will. The issue is what is the law? So now you're whipping me, and I call upon Jesus Huerta de Soto, who's a cop, and I say, Jesus, get Bernard to stop whipping me. And Bernard says, you shouldn't be whipping people. That's a violation of the non-aggression principle. And then you pull out the contract and you say, hey, look, you signed this. I gave him $20 million for this. I'm within my rights. This is not assault and battery. So my answer to Murray is, we're not discussing the will. I don't care about the will. What I care about is it justified for you to whip me or kill me? And the answer is yes, because I think my right to freedom is alienable. Namely, I can sell it. And my theory is that if it's not alienable, then I don't really own it. Or rather, part of ownership is the ability to alienate it. You own that nice blue sweater that you're wearing. Suppose I said you can't sell it. Well, not that you're thinking of selling it, but you might want to sell it. And now I say you can't. And if you do, I'll put you in jail. Well, in a sense, I violated your property rights in your shirt or your sweater. Because part of it is the right to wear it and preclude others from wearing it, and part of it is the right to give it away or sell it, namely make it alienable. Well, if I really own myself, if I own my freedom, I should be able to give it up. And if I can't give it up, then to some degree, I don't really own it fully. So I am a full believer in ownership of people, whereas Murray is only a partial believer in ownership of people because he wants to deprive people of one right, namely to sell themselves. And I don't see that that's justified. I don't think it's compatible with libertarian theory. If I really own myself, I have a right to sell myself. And now I'm selling myself to keep my son alive, and I value his life more than my freedom. And now somebody says, well, you can't do it. Well, that means my son dies. I don't want my son to die, and I stay free. I'd rather be a slave and he lives than he dies and I'm free. So that would be my response to Murray.
One of the things he points out in the section where he talks about voluntary slavery, he cites Rousseau quite interestingly, to the extent that if his argument is, and I'm putting it, so to speak, as being a devil's advocate here, is if you if you completely unown yourself, let's say, or sell yourself, then the master, if he's an absolute master, so to speak, has also property in the money he gave you. So what happens to the money that the billionaire, so to speak, gives to this person to could he actually, is this a sort of be a counter argument to this, or how do you see that?
Well, nice try, but I don't see that as a valid objection to my theory, because the deal is, you give me you don't even have to give me the 20 million. You can directly give the money to my doctors or my son's doctors. So you see, if you give it to me and now you own me, well, then you can say, give me the money back. The easy way around that is you don't give me the money, rather you give the money to my son's doctors, and that whole issue doesn't arise. So I don't think that that's a valid counter argument, but I appreciate that you're pushing back on this issue.
So just so if a slave wants to break out of the contract, must he pay, in your view, then reparations to the master?
No, if the slave tries to run away or commit suicide or anything else, the slave should be punished. It's as if I buy your sweater and now you want it back. Well, no, I paid you $20 for that sweater and I'm keeping it. And if you come to my house and steal it, you don't just have to pay me for it. You go to jail, because that was for keeps. And the guy who sold you that sweater, he can't come and repossess it and then pay you back, right? Because you own that sweater, and anyone who tries to take that sweater away is a criminal. Well, you own me. I'm making you my slave master. You own me, and if I run away, I'm stealing a very valuable, I'm patting myself on the back, very valuable piece of property. But you own me. It's as if I'm a cattle rustler or a horse thief, only instead of stealing your horse or your cow, I'm stealing me. You're the rightful owner of me now.
I see. And do you think there's a lot of difference compared to a normal servitude contract? It seems to me that it's very similar to some, just a similar type of contract, right? Or
no, very, very different than I forget what they call it, a servitude contract, which was 7 years, and you can't whip the person. It's just like a long-term contract. I mean, if you hire me for 7 years and I have to work for you for 7 years, I can't quit because you paid me for 7 years worth. Well, that's very different. You can't whip me, and it ends in 7 years. And so I think it's a very different kind of a thing. Now, this is sometimes called a specific performance contract. And what Murray says is, if I hire you to sing at my wedding and you agree, and then at the last minute you cancel, well, then all I can do is sue you for the money, or maybe to ensure I make you post a bond so that if you don't come, you relinquish your bond. And Murray says there is no such thing as a specific performance contract. It's not legitimate, and I disagree. And the example I use is, I'm a tightrope walker, and I walk on this rope that's 100 feet high, and I hold a little stick, and I hire you to hold the net under me. And in the middle of my performance, you say, well, I'm leaving. and I have a gun. And I say to you, you can't leave. You leave, I'll shoot you. I'm justified. You are obligated to do that specific performance. So I think that would be, you see, when you talk about singing at a wedding, who cares? But, now it's a matter of life and death, because I might fall off my rope and I'm 100 feet high and I'll die. And you've agreed to hold the net under me. Well, you gotta perform your specific performance. And I think in the same thing with the wedding, if you don't, there should be two types of wedding contracts, wedding singing contracts. One, where it's just a bond, or if you don't carry through, well, then I'll sue you. And the other is that I have a right to compel you to come and sing, to force you with a gun and make you sing. And if you don't sing, I'll shoot you. Why shouldn't we have contracts like that? They're a little weird, I admit that, but the net contract isn't so weird. In the case of the tightrope walker, most tightrope walkers want that net under them, and if you take that away, you're violating a contract, and and it's sort of like attempted murder or something like that. I'm not sure if that's the proper legal phrase, but I have a right to compel you to keep that net under me. I mean, you agreed to it and I paid you for it. You just can't walk out in the middle.
Right, absolutely. So regarding promises, you also have some issues with how Murray treats the aspect of.
No. I agree with Murray on promises.
Okay.
Promises are not the key, and here Murray makes a very good insight. The key is there any unjustified transfer of property? So I promise you that if you treat me nicely in this interview and don't criticize me, I'm kidding, I'll give you an ice cream. Well, at the end, I renege. I don't give you the ice cream. No property has exchanged improperly. But if it's a contract, if I pay you and then I don't give you the ice cream, well, then you're stealing the money from me. So I agree with Murray on promises, but I'm saying that a specific performance is a contract, not a promise. When you agree to hold that net under me, you didn't just make a promise. I paid you for it. And what I own is not the money. Namely, if you walk away, you have to give me back the money. That's not good enough. I own your body for the duration of my tightrope walk performance. And the same thing with voluntary slavery. So voluntary slavery is a specific case of specific performance contracts. And I think there is such a thing as a specific performance contract, not a promise. You didn't just promise me that you would hold the net. You contractually obligated yourself to do it. And I'm going to hold you to it.
Yeah. Very, very clear. This brings me to the second thing. I think you have a different emphasis, let's say, and that's the topic of abortion. I'm sort of connecting it because when he talks about abortion, he actually sort of Rothbard himself talks about, the inability of the will of the mother, let's say, when she first consents to have the child and then she suddenly changes her mind. What is your position? Your philosophy is of evictionism. How does it differ from Rothbard's, if it differs from Rothbard's viewpoint?
It very much differs from Rothbard. And just as people in the general public are very divided on abortion, some are pro-choice, some are pro-life, so is it true within the libertarian movement. And if I had to pick any other leader of the libertarian movement beside Murray Rothbard, I would pick Ron Paul. Ron Paul is also, wonderful, a great leader of libertarianism. Another person that I have infinite respect for, like Murray. And yet the two of them disagree totally. Murray is pro-choice, Ron Paul is pro-life. So here, they can't both be right because they diverge from each other. And I diverge from both of them. And I think that what I have is the proper libertarian analysis, and both of them are wrong. I say this with all due respect because I revere both of them, but I think they're both wrong. So what's the situation? Evictionism is a principled compromise between pro-life and pro-life and pro-choice. What do I mean by a principled compromise? Principled compromise is something that stems from a principle. Now let me give you a non-principled compromise. You say 2 + 2 is 4. I say 2 + 2 is 6. So a non-principled compromise would be to say, well, 2 + 2 is 5. This is a compromise. I'm cutting 6 and 4 in half, and I'm coming up with 5. So it's a compromise, but it's not a principled compromise because there's no premise from which you can deduce that 2 + 2 = 5. It's just a compromise, but it's not principle. Principle means that it stems from something, a basic premise that's true. So, see, the problem with abortion is really it's a, what's the word? It's a complex word. It means really two things. It's just sort of like a labor strike is two things. One is the ability to down tools and leave, and the other is to prevent scabs from taking your place. So a labor strike is really two things. And we libertarians believe in half of a labor strike, namely the right to quit en masse, if you want, but not the right to prevent other people. Well, it's very similar here. What the pro-life people say is the woman has to keep the baby for 9 months and may not evict the baby and may not kill the baby. The pro-choice people say the woman can do both. She can evict, namely remove the baby from her body, and also she can kill the baby. The compromise is, well, she can evict, but she can't kill. Now, where do I get that from? What's the basic premise from which I can derive that, such that it's a principled compromise, not an unprincipled compromise? Well, who owns the woman's body? I derive that from private property rights, which is the basic premise of libertarianism. Namely, she owns her body. She's the rightful owner of her body. And what is the status of the fetus? Well, the first status of the fetus is that it's a human being, because I believe that life starts with the fertilized egg. The sperm alone will not eventuate in a person. The egg alone will not eventuate into a person. But the fertilized egg, where the sperm gets into the egg, well, that's got all the DNA that you need, and in the right environment, that's a person. So I believe that that's a human being right there. We have two human beings. But what is the status of the human being, the small human being, the fetus, vis-a-vis the mother? It's a trespasser. The baby is a trespasser, innocent trespasser, but still a trespasser. Now, it's easy to see this in the case of rape. Woman's walking down the street, she gets grabbed, she gets impregnated, and now there's this person growing inside of her. Well, what do we call that person? A stowaway, a trespasser, something like that. And the woman says, well, I can't kill the baby because the baby is innocent, but I can evict the trespasser. And to say that she can't evict the trespasser, she's got to keep it for 9 months, is to deny her right as an owner of her own body. So both Ron Paul and Murray Rothbard are wrong on this. They don't realize that the woman is the proper owner of her body, and any person growing inside of her is a trespasser. Look, suppose I have this gun, and you're in Spain and I'm in New Orleans, but it's a very powerful gun, and I shoot it, and all of a sudden there's a baby growing inside of your stomach. Well, what's the status of that baby? A very small person. Well, that person is a trespasser. You have a right to evict that person, not to kill it. But if you have to kill it, it's too bad on the baby. You have that right to kick the baby out, or the woman does also. Now, one objection would be, well, there are very few babies that are a result of rape. How about voluntary sexual intercourse? Didn't the woman invite the baby into her body? And doesn't she therefore have an obligation to keep the baby for 9 months? No and no. Because an invitation requires two people, an inviter and an invitee. And at the time of sexual intercourse, there was only the woman. Forget about the husband for the moment. There was no person to invite, because when sexual intercourse occurs, it takes a little time for the sperm to get up through the fallopian tubes or whatever the tubes are and get into the egg. I don't know how long it takes, a half hour, an hour, or whatever, how fast the sperm is swimming. But at the time of intercourse, voluntary intercourse, there was nobody to invite yet. Somebody eventuates later, a half hour, an hour later. Now there's a person in there. But, just because, even if you did invite someone, which you didn't, it doesn't mean you have to keep them for 9 months. I'm now inviting you to my house for dinner. And around 10 o'clock, I start looking at my watch and I start hinting that, I'd like you to leave. And you say, oh, I'm staying 9 months. I say, so even if you invited the person, it doesn't mean that they stay for 9 months. And there was no invitation. Now, it just so happens that in the third trimester, the 7th, 8th, and 9th month, you can evict the baby without killing the baby. And I say you have an obligation to do that. Because if you kill an innocent person that you need not have killed in order to protect your property rights, you're not removing the person in the gentlest manner possible. And this is an innocent person. The baby is totally innocent. Now, I happen to be really pro-life in my druthers. My heart goes out to the pro-life side. And I noticed that we pro-lifers are losing right now, at least in the United States. Anyone can have an abortion pretty much whenever they want. And I noticed that at present medical technology, You can remove the fetus in the third trimester at present medical technology, but medical technology is always improving. Maybe in 10, 20 years, you'll be able to remove the baby in the 6th month, and another 50 years, maybe in the 5th month. Eventually, you'll be able to remove the baby. I mean, in 500 years, if we don't kill each other before then, and if we're still around, the medical technology would be such that you can remove the fetus at any time you want. So if we adopt evictionism, eventually we'll win. We pro-choice people. So what I'm now doing is I'm attempting to convert all the pro-choice people, all the pro-life people into evictionism. Because if you adopt evictionism, medical technology is on our side and eventually we'll win. Whereas if you stick to your incorrect view of pro-life, namely you can't evict, well, then we're gonna lose. So that would just be a pragmatic argument. But I think the deontological argument is very clear. The woman owns her body. The unwanted fetus, whether it's a result of rape or voluntary sexual intercourse, or the condom breaks or whatever it is, or the birth control pills don't work, the woman has the right to evict but not to kill. So that to summarize, again, Murray and Ron disagree with each other. They're both wrong. The correct view is evictionism. Look, I hate to be so snotty about it, but I'm just a young punk kid. Well, I'm almost 80, so I'm not really that young. But Murray and Ron are older than me. I should have more respect for them. No, I enjoy it when my students or people your age disagree with me, and I welcome that. I'm not a Randian cultist. I don't insist that my students or younger people like you agree with me. If you disagree with me and you push back on that, that's okay. We'll discuss it politely, and I'll try to convert you to the one true faith.
One response to what your argument isn't it, again, try to be devil advocate for the discussion, isn't it okay? Sure, to evict is better than to kill, for sure. A pro-life lifer would say. Yet, isn't there still a problem of proportionality, in the sense that you recognize that the trespasser is a trespasser, yet he is innocent? And now, at least nowadays, and maybe in the future, it will not be. There will not be the issue of proportionality. But isn't it nowadays not proportional, let's say, to evict the fetus, let's say after 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, given the fact that he's innocent at the end of the day?
Well, I think proportionality only applies to punishment. This is not punishment. We're now talking about property rights. If I stow away on your airplane, it would be nice if you kept me for 9 months or landed me, but you can push me right out without a parachute, because there are no positive obligations in libertarianism. And what you're now asking for is a positive obligation. For libertarians, there are only negative obligations. You have an obligation not to murder, not to steal, not to rape, not to kidnap, and that's it. You don't have any obligation to give charity to other people. It'd be nice if you did. It would be nice if the woman kept the baby for 9 months. I certainly favor that, but is she obligated to? Well, not according to libertarianism. And we want to be true to libertarian theory, and libertarian theory abjures positive obligations. And now what you're doing, and by the way, you don't have to be devil's advocate, although that's okay, but you can disagree with me. I won't hate you. We'll still be buddies. But if you want to be devil's advocate, that's okay. That may be the more polite way to say it. But the key is that you're now, what's the word? Letting the devil's foot into the tent, or I forget what the expression is, the cloven hoof under the tent, by opening up positive obligations. So I reject all positive obligations. I mean, if somebody is starving, it would be nice if you fed them. But if you don't, you're not a murderer. That's the libertarian view, and I'm trying to be true to libertarianism. I regard libertarian theory as the lodestar, as the basic premise of all that's good in political economy. And in your devil's advocacy, you're now trying to ask me, well, shouldn't I embrace positive obligations? No. If we embrace positive obligations, well, then we're a bunch of lefties.
Well, I agree with that, but I was stipulating the case. Let's say you own a candy store, and you see that I'm trying to grab a candy, right? And then you kill me for that. Isn't that, I don't agree with positive obligation, but isn't the fact that you killing me unproportional compared to the threat I'm posing you? That was the sense in which I was talking about proportionality with respect to the fetus.
Very, very good point. That's an excellent point. And I think my obligation is to, now, you're not a child. If you're a child, all bets are off. Forget, children are different for all political economy. You're an adult and you're stealing bubble gum or a candy bar. And what I say is, after you're caught, proportionality requires that you only have a slap on the wrist or, a minor punishment. But we're not now talking about punishment. We're now talking about you're in the act of stealing, and I have a right to stop you. Now, I have an obligation to stop you in the gentlest manner possible. If I have a net or if I have rubber bullets or something like that, then I'm obliged to use the rubber bullets. But suppose I don't have rubber bullets, and I don't have a net, and I don't have a baseball bat to hit you on the foot to stop you. All I've got is a bullet, and I'm aiming at your foot because I don't really want to kill you, but I miss, and I hit you right in the back, and I kill you. Am I a murderer? That's the only question. Am I a murderer? And the answer is no. I'm protecting my private property. You keep your goddamn mitts off of my candy bars. Now, the proportionality only comes in afterward, after we catch you, and now you're in court, and now the judge is trying to figure out what kind of penalty should we impose on you. And if he imposes the death penalty on you for stealing my candy bar or my bubble gum, well, that's disproportionate. But proportionality only comes in after, in the punishment part. But we're not now in the punishment part. You're in the midst of stealing this. And if I don't shoot you, and I don't have rubber bullets, and I don't have a net, and I don't have any other way of stopping you, you get away with the candy bar. We libertarians don't like people getting away with candy bars. You keep your mitts off of my candy bar.
Yeah, I agree. Interesting analysis. Then a third point is not really very much related to it, but I know you disagree with Murray on this, and that's the topic of immigration. He was beforehand never really talked so much about immigration. He talked mainly about immigration in economics terms. But then towards the end of his life, in his famous essay, Nations by Consent, he sort of rethinks all the issue. And according to him, the open border argument is for him not sufficient to the extent that it's, so to speak, a forced integration. He was looking into how ethnic Russians were subsidized or incentivized to get into Estonia, Latvia during the fall of the Soviet Union in order precisely to eliminate the culture of these countries. Why is Rothbard wrong on this, and why is your position the right one? Or you think it's the right one?
No, it is the right one. You made an interesting point. Murray changed his mind. And in my critique of him, I called him Rothbard 1 and Rothbard 2. Rothbard 1 believed in open borders. Rothbard 2 came under the baleful influence of Hans Hoppe, who I also greatly admire. I think he's a magnificent libertarian, but he's wrong on this issue. And again, I have these eyeglasses, and these eyeglasses are called libertarianism. And I want to be true to libertarianism. Okay, so here's the scenario. Somebody comes from Europe or from Africa or from Mars. There are Martians out there. And he goes to Wyoming in the middle of the Rocky Mountains. And what does he do? He starts homesteading. Comes in with a helicopter. He's landed. He has a tent. He puts corn in here, and he has a cow. Don't ask me. He got a cow in the helicopter. And now he's got a little farm. And now comes somebody from the U.S. government and says, who are you? He says, oh, I'm a Martian, or I'm an African, or I'm a European, or a South American, and how are you doing? And the officer says, well, you're an illegal immigrant. We didn't let you in here. You just sort of came uninvited. And get out, or you're a criminal. We're going to put you in jail, or at least we're going to kick you out. What libertarian law did this guy violate? He didn't violate any libertarian law. That land was virgin territory. And now we have John Locke, and we have Murray Rothbard, and we have Hans Hoppe, three people who have done more than any other three people on homesteading theory and from whence springs justified property. And this guy, this immigrant, he didn't violate any libertarian law. He just homesteaded virgin territory. Now, you know, we libertarians, we don't much like unowned property. Our idea is that every square inch of everything should be privately owned. My motto here is, if it moves, privatize it. If it doesn't move, privatize it. Everything either moves or doesn't move, so you privatize everything. Well, this guy is privatizing. He's stopping the tragedy of the commons. He's stopping unowned property. He's stopping government property. He's a good guy. He didn't violate any libertarian law. Now, here's what Hans says. Hans says, well, the U.S. government really owns that land in trust for somebody. And I say, Hans, you're an anarchist. What's this government, the legitimate government, doing anything? The government isn't legitimate. Government never homesteaded that land. No government bureaucrat ever put his foot on that land. How can you say that? And I don't get any good answer out of Hans. I think Hans is wrong and Murray is wrong. Because this guy did not violate any libertarian principle. The government does not own that land in the middle of Wyoming in the Rocky Mountains. That land has never been touched. Okay, so that's the deontology. But now we have, what do you call it, utilitarianism, pragmatism. Do we really want a trillion Martians to come to Wyoming? And the Martians are good guys. They're all great guys. Not one of them is a criminal. None of them have COVID. They're all great guys. Do we want them? No, we don't really want them. And then there are immigrants who are rapists. You got a lot of people in Germany and in Sweden. They come from countries where if a woman wears a miniskirt, that shows that the woman is evil, and the punishment for her is to rape her. This is not cool. This is not really... this is not really compatible with libertarianism. See, a lot of people who say that we should have open borders, they start saying, well, all immigrants are great guys, or fewer immigrants are criminals than the people already living in the country. I don't care about that. I think that there are many, many immigrants who I don't want around. And even if they're good, I don't want a trillion of them around. So how do we have our cake and eat it? How do we adhere to libertarian theory and also not be invaded by masses of good people and some bad people? Well, I'm glad you asked. The answer is privatize every square inch of the country. You privatize every square inch of the country, and now any Martian coming in, or any African or European or South American coming to Wyoming is a trespasser. Now, it's true that a lot of land in middle of Alaska, in the middle of Wyoming, is, what do they call it, submarginal land. Nobody wants it because it's not really economically viable. Well, too bad. If you're worried about immigrants, go spend a little money of your own and go homestead it. You don't have to stay there forever. You know, just homestead this land in the middle of Alaska or the middle of Wyoming for a year or so. Put in a crop, and then you're the owner. So now we have our cake and can eat it also. Namely, we can adhere to libertarian theory, and we don't have to be inundated by masses of criminal immigrants. See, the problem with Murray and Hans is they're willing to jettison libertarian theory in order to safeguard us. No way. We don't do that. We don't jettison libertarian theory. We cleave to libertarian theory. Libertarian theory is the be-all and the end-all of a political economy. We don't compromise with libertarian theory. What we do is we try to figure out a way to have libertarian theory and also to be safe. Let me give you another example. There was this movie, Dr. Strangelove. And in the movie Dr. Strangelove, they didn't have cell phones in those days, and they had to make a telephone call in order to save the world from nuclear exchange between Russia and the United States. And they didn't have a dime to put in the telephone box. And then there was this Coca-Cola machine, and there was plenty of change in the Coca-Cola machine, and somebody was ready to take his rifle and shoot the Coca-Cola machine and get a dime and make a call and save the world. And some critic said, "Oh, you can't do that. That's private property." Well, the answer to that is shoot the goddamn Coca-Cola machine and then pay the penalty. I mean, how much are they going to do for a Coca-Cola machine? You know, a little slap on the wrist, whatever it is. Another example is the Libertarian concentration camp guard. Now you might think, what? Libertarian concentration camp guard? That's a contradiction in terms. No. Now, here's the situation. In the Nazi concentration camp guards, concentration camps, the guards have to kill 100 people. 100 Jews, 100 gypsies, 100 blacks, 100 gays, whatever it is. You have to, everybody has a quota of 100. So I go in there and I'm a I'm a Libertarian concentration camp guard. And what I do is I kill only 90. I can get away with 90, that if I only kill 89, they'll realize that I'm not really true blue concentration camp guard material, but I can get away with killing only 90. So I save 10. And now the Nuremberg trials come, and they accuse me of killing 90 people. And they're right. I did kill 90 people. Why did I do it? Because I wanted to save 10. And now we're in the punishment stage. And what I do is I tell all the heirs of the 90 people I killed, I say, you know, I wish I could have saved your uncle, your brother, your grandmother, your sister. I just picked 90 people at random to kill, and I saved 10 people at random. I wish it could have been otherwise, but the reason I was there was to save 10 people. Now, if you want to kill me, you're justified, because I am a murderer. I'm a mass murderer. I killed 90 people. I'm a mass murderer. But on the other hand, I plead with you, let me live, because my heart was pure. And if you insist on killing me, you got to give me a ticker tape parade first, and you got to give me a medal, because I saved 10 people. So here is a way, again, of having our cake and eating it, of reconciling the irreconcilable, which sounds like another book I should write. I'm defending the undefendable. Here I'm reconciling the irreconcilable. Namely, I'm reconciling the libertarian non-aggression principle and utilitarianism, namely saving 10 lives, which we stipulate is pragmatic or utilitarian. I'm a good guy. I saved 10 people. The other 90 would have died anyway. Because you dirty rat, you're a real Nazi. If you would have been in my place, you would have killed 100. But I only killed 90. So I'm a good guy. So these are ways that we can reconcile the irreconcilable. Getting back to immigration, we can adhere to libertarian theory, which Murray and Hans are giving up on. I'm not giving up on a libertarian theory. On the other hand, I want to promote happiness. I don't want to be inundated by criminal immigrants. So my solution is, let's privatize everything. And now if they come, they're trespassers, we can kick them out.
And what about, you've said, of course, that, and I think Hoppe would agree with this, that the government does not own anything legitimately because it's an illegitimate institution to begin with. Yet he has this idea of the trustee. According to him, even if the government does not own the land legitimately, still the land is not unowned. It's owned by the taxpayers. So I was wondering, so you disagree with that, but let's.
It's not owned by the taxpayers. It's owned by the homesteaders, and nobody homesteaded it yet. The Martian was the first guy to homestead it. Look, libertarian theory is very clear on this. The rightful owner is not the taxpayer. Taxpayer didn't do squat. Now, it's true the government wouldn't allow them to, but that's another issue. The taxpayer never homesteaded that land. So forget about the government. The taxpayer doesn't own it. The homesteader owns it, and the Martian, by stipulation, is the first guy that homesteaded it. He's the rightful owner.
So is it legitimate? Now we're not talking about immigrants. We're talking about, or at least a microscopic immigrant, in the sense that, you know, from different counties, so to speak. So there's a public road and a very, very luxurious place, and then there's a homeless that homesteads that piece of land, say, for example, by, I don't know, carving out a home for himself or something. Yet in a place where everybody doesn't like him, or and you can tell, at least hypothetically, that if it were privatized, this would never have happened. Do you think still the homeless has the right to do that, even though hypothetically in a libertarian society he wouldn't be able, because that road would be in the hands of people who wouldn't accept him? Or I don't know, maybe I complicated the matters, but I hope I was clear.
No. That's a very, very good objection. I think you're doing a superlative job of devil's advocacy, or a objections. I don't think that, let's say there's a highway, right? New Orleans is called the Highway 10, I-10, and it runs all the way from Florida to California, and it runs through New Orleans. And what I do is I homestead 50 feet of it across the whole highway, so nobody can get past me. Well, this is not a good analogy, because when we talk about what do you call it, Wyoming and the Rocky Mountains, nobody ever touched that, but people touch the I-10. I drive over it myself. So I think there's a disanalogy there. I mean, nice try, because you can see that if I homestead 50 feet of the I-10, nobody can use the whole highway anymore. You have to go around. It would be just a utilitarian mess. But there's a disanalogy. Nobody homesteaded the land in what do you call it? Oh, I forget the name of the
Wyoming.
Wyoming. I forgot the name. Wyoming. I'm getting senile. Nobody homesteaded the Wyoming, but people did homestead the I-10. So the analogy fails.
Yeah. Another topic, it's different from the one on immigration, but I really was interested in, because I felt very bad when I read this article by Rothbard written in 1967 on the Jewish question, or at least the conflict between Israel and Palestine. It's called, if I recall, War Guilt in the Middle East. The only thing that I liked was the initial part where he says libertarians need to take side, even though every state is illegitimate. Still, we live in a world of states, so we need to, but apart from that, I felt that his analysis was actually a bit too certain about saying things that, in my opinion, were a bit, complicated. And then I read your essay, and I think from 2016 on this topic, because according to Rothbard, all states are illegitimate, but in that article he points out, especially out of all of these states, the most illegitimate of all is Israel. And why do you find that puzzling? And also I find it puzzling, but yeah.
I mean, when you put it that way, it just sounds so silly. Israel is the worst of all states. I mean, we have Mao's China, we have Hitler's Germany, we have Stalin's Russia, we have Pol Pot's, where was Pol Pot from? I forget which country. Cambodia. I mean, mass murderers. Who's the Israelis been killing? And when they kill, before they kill, they drop leaflets on people and say, go away from here. And what the Palestinians do is they have their gun emplacements in the middle of a hospital or in the middle of a school, and they start shooting rockets over to Israel. And then when Israel shoots rockets back to the source, they say, oh, but you're killing people in a hospital, you're killing people in a school. And, Israel is very evil. I mean, this is preposterous. But again, I go back to the basic premises of libertarianism, and that's property rights. Who owns this stuff? And yes, if you go back to 1870, there were Palestinians there. And then in 1947, they were told to leave so that the Jews could be pushed out into the sea. Namely, they were cooperating with the invading 5 Arab armies. And now they should be let back in, the right of return. And I have a book co-authored. I have 2 co-authors, Alan Fuderman and Rafi, I forget his. I'm getting senile. I can't think of my co-author's name. I'm a disgrace. What's my co-author's name? You have to help me.
Rafi Farber. I forgot.
Yes. Well, you're getting senile too, and at your age, you're pathetic. I have a book coming out based on 4 or 5 articles that we wrote criticizing Murray. Now, again, I revere Murray Rothbard. I think he is Mr. Libertarian. But, just because he's Mr. Libertarian doesn't mean he's right on every issue. And we discussed 2 or 3 issues, and now this is maybe the 4th issue where I diverge from him, and I think he was wrong. And I think he was wrong on Israel. I think that if you go back 2,000 years ago, there were no Arabs there. It's sort of like in South Africa. The first people in South Africa were white people from, where is it? Which country? Right near Germany. The one with the Holland. There were people from Holland, and then they had a good economy, so a lot of black people came to South Africa to work for them. Well, it was similar with Israel. Israel had a good economy, and a lot of Palestinians came there afterward. But there were Jews since 2,000 years ago. Now, it's true that the Jews killed a whole bunch of Canaanites, but they killed every last one of them. And then they homesteaded it. So there are no Canaanites around that can say, well, you know, we really own this stuff. Now, this was not nice of the Jews, but that's what happened. But at a certain time, the Romans kicked them out. And then, but not kicked them all out. There were always Jews in Israel, in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv and other places around there. So my co-authors and I go way back to 2,000 years ago. And we say that there were Jews there before. And then, you know, this right of return, it's true that the Palestinians left in 47 and early 48 to make it easier for the Arab armies to kill all the Jews. But there were a lot of Jews in the 5 countries, and they were kicked out. And nobody talks about the right of return there. So it's a little uneven. So I disagree very strongly with Murray on this. I don't think that Israel is the worst country. I mean, that's a highly problematic claim, and I don't think that the Jews have to allow the right of return for these people who cooperated with the enemy of the Jews. They weren't just going on vacations or something like that. They were told by the Egypt and by Saudi Arabia and by Lebanon and all Syria and all those other countries to leave to make it easier for them to kill all the Jews. Because if they were there in the middle of it, it would be harder for them to kill the Jews. So they were aiding and abetting the enemy, and I think that they were enemies of Israel. And when you lose a war, you know, you have to pay some. When you lose a just war, you have to pay a certain penalty. And I think that, I forget which war it was, and then there's this area, the Sinai Peninsula, that, what's his name, Eisenhower made the Jews leave. Well, I think the Jews should have kept the Sinai Peninsula. They won that fair and square in a war started by the other guys. Look, you're in Spain and I'm in the U.S. And if you attack the United States and you lose, and somehow we get a part of Spain, well, you know, you shouldn't be declaring war on us, and vice versa. You know, so if you're on the unjustified side of a war and you lose, well, you know, you got to pay some sort of penalty. And the Sinai Peninsula and the Golan Heights would be another area where the Jews are the proper owners of. And the same thing with what they call the West Bank, or Judea and Samaria. So we now have a whole book. It's 300 or 400 pages, and we go over the history of this, and we document all sorts of claims about this. So that would be another area where Murray and I disagree. Now, look, I promised you an hour, and we've got just a minute or two. So let me just say that there are other technical issues where I disagree with Murray, and maybe we could do another show on that. For example, Murray thinks that money is unique. And my co-author Bill Barnett and I, at least I remember his name, believe that no, money is a capital good. And then there's another area where Joe Salerno, Bill Barnett, and I also criticize Murray and Hans on, what is it, time preference. We all 5 of us agree that the richer you are, the less likely you are to have a high time preference. But they believe it's apodictic, necessarily true. And Bill Barnett and I and Joe Salerno believe it's only a tendency, not necessarily true. And there are 1 or 2 other technical areas where Murray and I disagree, not so much libertarianism, but more Austrian economics. So if you want to have a follow-up, we could do that as well.
Definitely. It was a pleasure, Professor Blog, really, for having you with us. We talked about many issues from slavery to Israel. And I think that the most important thing I get out of it, of all of this, and I really hope the listeners as well get out of, and think about all of these things and reflect on how, even though the structure, the foundations of libertarian theorists or Austrian libertarians is the same, so private property, freedom of association, and so forth, and the non-aggression principle, they disagree on some topics, and it's good to debate. We're not a cult like maybe the Randian cult, and so I think it's very important, and I really hope they I really enjoyed it, and I'm sure our listeners enjoyed it. So definitely, I hope to have another show, maybe discussing the technical issues, as you said, economics, even other things like maybe copyrights and these things. But I know you have some differences. So thank you very much, Professor Block, again.
My pleasure. Let me just say that it's not just me disagreeing with Murray. Murray disagreed with Mises. Murray disagreed with Hayek. We all disagree with each other a little bit on things. Hans came along with the excellent argument ethics, which supplanted Murray's natural law. So there's lots of disagreements, but we're all buddies. We're all trying to learn from each other. And I'm glad to see if libertarianism is in the hands of people like you, I'll be very happy.
Thank you very much.
Take care.